Hello there. My name is Warren Black. I am the morning host at All Classical Portland. Anybody heard of that? Okay, a few. Good. Glad to hear that. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And if you do listen, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. I'm here tonight. Great program of some scene painting by Modest Mussorgsky. A great big piano concerto, one of the real monsters of the repertoire, and a new piece by Anna Klein, a relatively new piece for us here, Anna Klein, and Till Eulenspiegel's Merry Pranks. So a lot of variety in the program tonight, going to be lots of fun. I'm here tonight to introduce you to the Oregon Symphony's brand new principal horn, Jeff Garza. All right, I know I would get that wrong first. Jeff Garza is brand new to the symphony, although not really, because it's been a weird year and a half. So Jeff was hired. Tell me when you started.
So I auditioned for Oregon Symphony in October 2019, thinking that I would play some concerts at the end of that season as a guest and start full-time as the principal in September 2020. And obviously that didn't happen. So.
Oh, well. Well, yeah, that was an interesting time in the before times. So, but welcome to town. So tell me about the process. So you got hired and then were planning to move here, and how did that all work out?
When they offered me the job, obviously I was super excited and sort of started thinking about the logistics of moving and how we do that. My fiance lives in San Francisco and I was living in Texas at the time, so there was also trying to figure out how we were going to manage that move together, if that's what we were going to do. So there was a lot of things to think about. So we had a kind of whirlwind of life changes to ponder, so we kind of went through the whole next few months trying to think about all the things that would entail moving to Portland. And I guess, we started kind of getting a sense in the early spring of 2020 that some things might not go according to plan. And of course, by spring 2020, I was in San Antonio, Texas, with the symphony there. I played my last concert and moved to the Bay Area to be with my fiance, knowing that the symphony was most likely done for the season. But I still, like a lot of people, thought, well, this will probably last a couple months. Maybe it'll be done by the summer. So we still were full steam ahead to move here September 2020, and then that got pushed back to January 2021, and then the whole season is canceled. So we just had to kind of adapt and make some, new plans, I guess you would say. Luckily, she's not a musician. She has actually a stable career, and she's a nurse practitioner for UC San Francisco, and she's actually still working there remotely right now. So that's been nice that she's able to keep that job for the time being. So we just waited patiently and hoped things would eventually change for the better as far as orchestras go. And in the meantime, we also had a baby, so that was what we did while we were waiting for the pandemic to stop. So that, of course, adds a whole other element to this journey that we were both on. So it's been crazy. It's been, I know it's been crazy for everybody the last year and a half, but I think especially for me, it's been really, really a lot of different emotions, a lot of different challenges, but it's just amazing to finally be here and to be starting with this wonderful orchestra.
And yeah, this is the first, I guess, new principal horn in decades. So that's also a really exciting new challenge, I guess, for you, right?
It is. I mean, people kind of get used to, both in the audience and the orchestra, a certain personality, certain type of playing. And so anytime you kind of come in and succeed someone who's been there for a long time, there's lots of adjustments to be made on everybody's part. I think one happy thing for me, is that there's also a new conductor, so it kind of takes the pressure off me in a way. I'm not having to adapt to to someone who's been used to another player. We're both kind of learning as we go the culture of the orchestra and what kind of playing goes on here, and he kind of gets to start from scratch with me as far as how I lead the section. So in some ways there's a silver lining in that regard of starting with a new maestro.
And so tell us a little bit, I guess, well, let's start with the horn. Let's start with your journey with the horn. So we talked a few days ago. I know that you're from Texas, and so tell us how you got, like, what was that moment when you're like, ooh, the horn?
I mean, it's funny. I feel like it's a kind of a two-step story, because the first step, how I actually ended up playing the horn, is not a very interesting one, because I didn't even know what a French horn looked like the first time I opened the case, honestly. Like, I knew I wanted to be in band, because my parents kind of steered me towards that. My mom was in band when she was in high school, and she was a clarinet player. And I was trying to decide, okay, well, what instrument do I want to play? I know the trumpet, I know the saxophone, I know the drums. I really wanted to play the drums. That seemed like really fun to beat things and make a lot of noise. I'm 12 years old. I'm just kind of trying to figure out, what would be the most fun thing to do. Unfortunately, everybody wants to play the drums in junior high band. So they gently steered me away from drums and said, wouldn't you like to play something, a little more unusual? And my mother had a friend when she was in school who played the French horn, and she told me, it's such a beautiful instrument. And so I was like, okay, that sounds good. French horn. I'll play the French horn. So I got the mouthpiece, and I buzzed on the mouthpiece for about a month, and then they finally gave me the instrument, and I started playing it. And I think I had some aptitude for it, but it wasn't something that I was that excited about, honestly, for the first year or two that I was playing it. And the second step of the journey was a friend of mine gave me a cassette tape. We're talking here like early 90s. A cassette tape of the best of John Williams. So then I realized, oh, that's what the horn sounds like. And then I got very excited about playing the horn when I realized that this thing that I was playing was what made these sounds that I knew from movies and from this cassette that I was listening to. And so that's what really got me motivated. And I would say when I was about in 8th grade, suddenly I was like wanting to practice 3 hours a day and just kind of really devote a lot of time and energy to it, take private lessons, things like that. So that's kind of my journey, and I kind of fell in love with the instrument after I actually started playing it for a few years. So it's probably unusual for a lot of people that choose an instrument. I know a lot of people, when you ask them why they choose the horn, they're like drawn to the sound. A lot of people choose horn after they've already started another instrument like trumpet or even string instruments and fall in love with the sound of it. And I guess I fell in love with the sound of it too, but I was already playing it. I just couldn't make it sound like what I was hearing on the cassette until I put in a lot of practice.
It's true. It's kind of it's a very heroic sound, especially the way John Williams uses it. It must have. That's like something to apply yourself to. It's like I wanna make that noise. I wanna make that sound.
Yeah, it's at least in movie music, it often is synonymous with the heroic character, or sometimes the romantic scenes, and it's just got this beautiful quality of being able to be very big and brassy and play with the trumpets and the trombones, and also to be really soothing and beautiful and playing with the strings and the woodwind. So it's such a versatile instrument, and I think I picked up on that right away. To me, it was a very appealing thing about it.
But it's a lot of metal for a young person. How old were you when you started then?
12.
12, yeah. Because there's not like a reduced size.
No, I think there might be. That was definitely not something that was made available to me. We just started on the normal instrument you would play when you were in high school, and if I have pictures of myself when I was in 6th grade starting the horn is like bigger than I am. I can barely like hold it. So yeah, it's you kind of have to grow into it to start with. I mean, it's a lot of adjustment to hold it in the proper position when you're kind of a tiny person. So for that reason, most people don't start until they're about 12 years of age, because you kind of need to just be big enough to actually hold the instrument.
There's also, in some ways, it's a little, I guess, like the coelacanth of the orchestra. It's one of the things that's related to much older instruments. A lot of, I mean, there's been technological improvements made in valves and everything, but it's still that's a lot of work. I mean, it's a notoriously, it's had a reputation for being a notoriously difficult instrument. And was that part of, at some point, what was like, yeah, I'm going to do this because I'm going to figure out?
Luckily, I don't think I ever knew that when I started getting serious, that it was a difficult instrument. You know, I just was like, this is fun. I enjoy playing. And I don't think it occurred to me until maybe like in high school that you start hearing, oh, horn is one of the really difficult instruments. And what I realized is it's not necessarily difficult. I mean, I think all instruments are difficult and easy in their own ways, you know, and with enough work and effort and maybe some talent, you can master any instrument with enough practice and good teaching. But the thing about the horn that I think separates it from the other instruments, it's completely unpredictable. Even when you attain a really high level of playing, so even the greatest players in the world, occasionally something doesn't go right. And that's a very frustrating and scary thing. And I was explaining to you, Warren, you know, a lot of people, what they notice oftentimes is they often hear sometimes a horn make a mistake in a concert, maybe more than the other instruments. And the reason is because if you visualize a piano and the keys on a piano, you can imagine if a piano, the keys got smaller and smaller and smaller as you go higher and higher and higher. That's what the French horn is like. So if you don't hit the note in the exact precise spot, you'll go one way or the other and hit the wrong note. And sometimes there's things like, you know, water gets in your horn, condensation gets in your horn, and that little blurp can cause the air to back up in a certain way that changes things. So there's all sorts of things that can go wrong. And things can go wrong on any instrument, but I feel like on horn, no amount of preparation can make you perfect. And I think that's a very frustrating thing for students at a certain point in their development. And if you ever want to actually be able to do this and not go crazy, you have to kind of accept that as part of the quirks of the instrument. And the funny thing is if you let go of that perfection, you actually end up making fewer mistakes because you just kind of, you let go of the perfectionism. I think it took me a long time to realize perfectionism was not a positive trait.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. Because, yeah, I guess you occasionally probably always heard a horn kind of clam just a little bit. So how important is the actual instrument that you have? I know people are asking violinists, like, where's your violin from and who made it and how old is it? How important is that from the horn player's perspective?
I think it's as important as any other instrument. The way I kind of think about instruments is every musician sort of has a sound in their head of what they want to produce, the sound they want to play with. And the goal for finding an instrument is to find an instrument that gets you as close to that sound as you can possibly get without having to work for it so much. So I think any good musician can sound good on any instrument once they kind of get the feel of it, but they can't get to that quite ideal sound unless they have an instrument that really responds to what they're going for. And so it is important, and I feel like I kind of didn't, I was very resistant to, I played on one instrument for most of my career until about 5 years ago. And I was very resistant to changing because I felt pretty comfortable. Although I knew that there was something missing, I just felt too comfortable on what I was playing on to actually take the leap and make a change. And at a certain point, I was kind of forced into making a change, which we could talk about, but once I did, then I finally realized, wow, I really have been holding myself back for years because now I can actually play the way I want to play and I'm not being held back by the instrument at all. So I was very stubborn about that for a long time because you kind of want to just do what works. But if you take the risk, sometimes something even better can come along. But you can go the other direction too, of keep trying all sorts of different horns and all sorts of different mouthpieces and kind of go crazy that way too. So I think I erred on the side of not wanting to push that boundary.
So just for the record then, this is the new horn you've been playing for about 5 years. Who made it and where do they make it?
a horn made by a man named Keith Berg, who is from Dunster, British Columbia. And he actually stopped making horns recently, so yeah, it's really a great bit of luck that I came across one and was able to get it. And they're very expensive now because of that. They're limited edition at this point. So yeah, his horns are generally considered by, I think, most people that play the types of horn I play on to be as good as it gets, So yeah, I was extremely lucky. It's so hard to find one of these instruments. I kind of just stumbled across one, and very lucky to be able to purchase it.
It's got a rare Dunster. All right. So tell us a little bit about what the job of principal horn is, how it's distinct from being a horn player in an orchestra. So yeah, what do you do?
Well, like any principal in the orchestra, your primary responsibility is to play the first part, which usually means playing most of the solos and playing the leading part, or usually the highest part, so the most obviously heard from the audience's perspective. So that's the most obvious part of the job. But the other part of the job is being sort of the coordinator of your section, which can be assigning parts. If something isn't quite right, we might huddle together at a break, and I'll lead a little mini sectional, and we'll kind of try to fix something. And generally just kind of be the person who is sort of the first among equals, I guess, is the way I look at it. And I don't really see myself as I'm the boss and you got to do what I say. I feel like somebody has to kind of be the person who is responsible for the section when we're interacting with the conductor, for example. And so my style has always been, I've been a principal on my entire career, is just to make everybody in my section feel part of the team and feel like, we're all in this together, and feel free to let their voice be heard. And I take that and listen, and sometimes I have to take that to the conductor, so I'm kind of a conduit sometimes with the conductor and also with the personnel manager. So I'd say those are the two parts of the job, sort of the artistic job and then the administrative part of the job.
Oh, and you mentioned playing the upper parts. It's an interesting aspect of French horn playing is you tend to play either a high part or the low part, right? Generally.
I think generally that's true. What's interesting though is that you kind of have to be able to play high and low. I feel for many generations there was sort of this idea of the high horn player, the low horn player, and it is true that first and third parts tend to be higher and second and fourth parts tend to be lower. But if you really play in an orchestra day in, day out, you realize you can't just specialize on one or the other, because it'll come back to bite you at a certain point if you can't, because there are lots of pieces where the fourth horn player has to play at the very top of the register, and there are pieces like the Till Eulenspiegel that goes down to the bottom part of the register for the first horn, so you can't hide. So actually I think there's been sort of a shift in horn playing. When you go take an audition, I don't think these days you can get away with saying I'm a high player or a low player. I think you have to play everything, and we're actually putting together a second horn audition right now that's going to be in January, and you're putting together the list, and we're trying to make sure this person needs to be able to do everything well. We actually want to hire the best player, not just the best low player. So maybe I'm different from some of my colleagues, but I feel strongly about that. I don't like to think of myself as a high player. I like to think I can do all of it as well as I need to, because when I'm playing chamber music, for example, there's tons of low stuff. We're playing solo pieces, so I think it's a full, well-rounded musician. I don't think would want to pigeonhole themselves.
Oh, and so speaking of being able to play all over the place, we'll be hearing you prominently in Till Eulenspiegel tonight. That's one of those standard pieces that I'm sure you've played more than a few times. What's approaching that like?
Well, I have played it a few times. it's an interesting. Well, first of all, it's a big excerpt, meaning like I had to play that piece to get a job in this orchestra. Like, so it's one of those pieces. So there's always a little bit of extra, a little pressure on a piece like that. But it's interesting because it's a funny little solo. It's so unlike any other solo in the repertoire. Like we were talking about, the horn has all these big heroic solos, and then has these beautiful romantic lyrical solos, thinking of like Tchaikovsky Fifth Symphony. And this one is, you have to kind of be sort of a practical joker. There's like this element of being kind of a little stinker. So it's not something you associate with the horn. You kind of think more of maybe like, I don't know, clarinet or bassoon, but Strauss chose the horn to sort of represent this character. So that's a nice kind of special challenge, is to try to get that effect, which is not what we normally think of as characteristic for the horn.
I don't know, this part also, Strauss's history with the horn, since his father was like the leading German horn player of the 19th century. So you're telling me about, there's a story about this, or maybe it wasn't this piece, but there are horn players coming to Strauss and saying, "Why did you write this? Nobody can play this."
Yeah, actually, I was talking with David Densmeyer about this. We were just talking about something during a break, and he told me the story, and I had heard it a little bit differently. So we kind of combined our anecdote. So this, to make it the best version of this story, he was telling me that during the first performance, or the first rehearsal, when Strauss put the music out on the stand, the first horn came up to him and said, "Maestro, this is impossible. I can't play this. This is not written for the French horn. It's not playable." And Strauss said, "Well, that's not true. I heard my father play it every morning when he warmed up." So that's the genesis of that solo, according to legend. And it makes sense because it does kind of sound like a warm-up. It sounds like it kind of goes way, way up high and then way, way down low. There's even a note that could be what we call a stopped note, which is when we were talking about how the horns developed over time. When they didn't have valves, you'd have to change notes using your hand in the bell. And there's a note in there you could play stop that would be very characteristic in this solo. So I have a feeling there is some truth to that. I need to do a little more research before I can, but it's a great anecdote, so I think let's just pretend that it's true.
Yeah, we'll say that that's true. I guess, yeah, with the few minutes we have left, I was wondering if anybody had any questions. Yes? All right. So the question is, if the horn is easy to make a bad note, do conductors, are they aware of that, and do they take that into account?
They are aware of it. I would say one of the things that's happened over the past couple of generations is the advent of ubiquitous recordings. Because of that, I would say the standard has gone way, way, way up. And I think, like any musician, a conductor is going to not give you grief about a missed note. It's when they start sort of, cascading that there's a problem. So I think conductors understand. They're in front of an orchestra all the time. They know the quirks and the difficulties of every instrument. So I think a good conductor knows that playing horn has a special. There's a special amount of risk to it, and if you want a musician to give a performance where they're giving their all and they're taking risks and they're taking chances to do something great, there is going to be always an element. And I think that goes for any instrument, but I think it's especially true on the horn. So to answer your question, I think most conductors, if they're good conductors, will give grace to the horns, especially, but to all of us, because they want us to feel relaxed so that we can play our best. If we were under fear of every time we made a mistake, that we would be in trouble. We wouldn't play very well. We'd be anxious and timid, and it wouldn't lead to the best kind of music making.
I'm wondering if if Till Eulenspiegel is for horn players kind of what that clarinet gliss at the beginning of Rhapsody in Blue is. It's like, okay, here's this moment where I'm a little exposed.
There are a lot of pieces like that. It's definitely one of them. I mean, there's another one, it's Bruckner's Fourth Symphony, also starts with this very isolated horn solo. There's a moment in Ravel Piano Concerto that goes to this stratospheric note, and you're all alone. So there's a lot of moments like that for the horn, but this is definitely one of them.
And one of that's that one moment in Beethoven's Fifth too, where it's like, here you are.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other question, anybody? Oh, yes, ma'am.
I believe it's Rimsky-Korsakov. I read. I'm actually not playing. That's the one piece I'm not playing on. But I think I read a little bit about that. I think Mussorgsky wrote. Do you know the answer to this? Maybe.
I'm pretty sure. Well, it's interesting. I was going through the program notes today, and they mentioned both of them in there. So, and I haven't looked at the score to see.
I think Rimsky-Korsakov orchestrated it. Was my understanding, but like a lot of Mussorgsky's music.
Yeah. So the question is about the Kovanschina, the Dawn on the Moscow River, because there was arrangements made by both Shostakovich and by Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. Granted, Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, I mean, like, how much Russian opera would there be if he hadn't been around to finish everybody's work for them?
I'll bet if you check your program, it says in there. It doesn't say? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you have to catch the maestro at the stage door.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, ma'am. Yeah,
yes.
I'm wondering if this is the original, because there have been other arrangements of this piece, but is this the original
I'm
Strauss?
Pretty sure this was the original. I know there's an arrangement I've played several times for quintet, and it's actually brilliantly done. It's for horn, clarinet, bassoon, violin, double bass, and that's the only other version I know. But it doesn't surprise me that there's lots of different arrangements. Like, this is such a classic piece and such a wonderful, colorful piece. So I'm sure it's been arranged in all sorts of different ways.
Mm-hmm. You have a favorite like horn hero? Because I know there's one coming to town later this week.
Yes, actually, that's funny you mentioned that. Radovan Vlakovic is my favorite soloist. So if you don't know, he's coming to play a concert with Chamber Music Northwest. I think he's playing the Brahms Horn Trio, and I've actually been fortunate enough to play a concert with him and meet him, and so I'm very excited to come see him play that show. If you don't know who he is, he's one of the greatest living horn soloists, and also just a wonderful, warm person. It's always nice when people play great and also are really nice people. That doesn't always happen. Yeah, he's one of my favorites. Growing up, my hero was Dale Clevenger, who played principal horn of the Chicago Symphony for many years. Dennis Brain, of course, is kind of the one of the legendary players. And then there's a player right now who's the principal horn of the Berlin Philharmonic, Stefan Dorr, who I always kind of go to for inspiration. And I'm learning a piece like, how does Stefan do it? That's probably how I should approach it too.
Nice. Yeah. I guess, yeah. That's. Anything else you wanted to add?
I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm so excited. I love Portland, and I'm really grateful that all of you are coming back to the concert hall. I know it's a weird time to be coming back and being amongst people again, but it's so much better to play for an audience than to play for a cold camera. So we're glad that life is getting back to some version of normal now, and hope it continues to go even further that way.
Yeah, we're delighted to see you all here tonight. Jeff Garza, the new principal horn with the Oregon Symphony. Thank you guys so much. I'm Warren Black. Enjoy the program tonight.